Hello and welcome to this edition of Dr. K's Psychobabble. Today what we're going to be talking about is a topic that I introduced very early in my developmental psych class. And I covered a little bit when I'm teaching developmental perspectives within intro psych. But the developmental perspective is the, let me use an analogy. You've all heard of rose-colored glasses, and that's not only a reality. If you put on rose-colored glasses, everything would look reddish, but it's also an analogy for seeing things in a positive light. So you can select those glasses, and you can put them on and choose to look at things in a positive light. So just as we put on rose-colored glasses in order to accomplish that task, in order to understand human psychology, in order to get another, let's say, perspective on that, we put on these glasses, and it changes the way we look at psychological phenomena and experience. And it's called the developmental perspective. And the developmental perspective is simply, we take a psychological phenomenon that we experience, let's say memory, and we realize that memory is not static across the lifespan. It changes. Our capacity to remember things, the structure of our memory, long-term, short-term, semantic memory, procedural memory, all of these things, what we know in psychology about the concept of memory is all those different things. They appear and develop and change over the course of our lifespan. So in the psychological perspective, we can talk about memory. But when we take the developmental perspective, we say, well, at what point in a person's life are we actually looking at here? What is the age of the individual? So if somebody asks me, how effective is memory in people? I'd say, well, how old is the person? Because when they're at a certain age, that's one set of answers. And when they're at another age, that may be another set of answers. So we simply add the age component when we're asking questions in psychology. Now, the typical, well, I won't say the typical question, but the question in my personal history of teaching that came up that really exemplifies this. I was sitting in a class once, and I asked, how does divorce affect the kids? And certainly this is a very profound social question that we have. There's lots of divorce, and there's lots of statistics about how it affects the kids. Now, keeping in mind, this is also sort of a trick question, because I was seeking a particular answer, the developmental perspective, but people started raising their hands, and they said, well, they may go into depression, they may not do well in school, they may have trouble making friends, they may isolate, they may move back in developmental stages, such they might start bedwetting again, or some even stop talking and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's great. And we're all going through, and then one person raises their hand in the back of the room, and they say, and she said, they throw a party. And that was hilarious. And it really, I think she grabbed onto the idea that I wasn't necessarily referring to kids as young people. The kids at any age. The divorce could happen way later. And in this particular instance, the individual told the story that her and her siblings had watched their parents try to make the relationship work all the way through their childhood and into their adulthood, and they finally, after years, convinced their parents, it's okay, you guys can get a divorce now. And they did, and both were happier, and the kids threw a party for mom, and they threw a party for dad, and so we see the divorce happening at that point in their life, when they were all adults, when the kids were adults, produced different results than what we were talking about the beginning of the class, which was, what if you have a divorce very early in life? What does that affect? So when we're studying models and theories of human development, those theories not only describe the psychological experience, but they describe it over time, over a timeline, and how it changes. So we're going to take a look at some of these theories and put them over a timeline. Now these are estimates. Don't, when I was creating these graphics, they're not exactly precise, but here's our little timeline. So this is the age. We go from prenatal on the left to birth 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 14, 17, 18, and then into adulthood up until age 90. And what we can do, we can lay out across this screen the different developmental theories that there are. And the first one I want to point out is Erikson's theory, probably one of my favorites and very popular theory within developmental psych. And this has to do with the psychosocial development. He actually coined that term, psycho, meaning the psyche, the mind, interacting with the social world. So Erikson identified that we change over time in terms of the development of our identity changes over time as we further and further and deeper increase the interactions with the social world around us and the expectations of the social world around us. So the first task at hand, Erikson portrays his theories as dichotomies, and it's, kind of one or the other. What's going to happen here? When in truth, it's really a continuum. But the first one, trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative. I think I might have got that wrong, but anyway, trust, autonomy, initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, generativity, and integrity are the stages that he talks about throughout the lifespan. Now, Erikson, of course, was a student of Freud, so we have Freud's theory here, which often misinterpreted as a sexualization of childhood, but it really is it's the location of the formative energy that drives development. Is really very, very heavily dependent on Darwinian theory of a drive within the individual, and what becomes the adult sex drive in its infancy focuses on particular parts of the body as the individual discovers their autonomy and their individuality. So we all have seen babies grab something, and where do they put it? Right in their mouth, because the neurological development in their mouth is far more advanced than the rest of their body. Neurological development in utero and in early life is cephalocaudal, meaning head to tail. So we have lots of sensitivity in the mouth area. That's the best place to explore the world. And then we move into the potty training area, where that's sort of the focus, and then the discovery of the genitals. And these are all ways in which the developing nervous system is interacting with the world. And then the latency stage, which is basically Freud's admission they didn't quite know what was going on there. And then the genital stage, the phallic stage before, and then the genital stage being adolescence and into adulthood. And Freud quite felt that human development pretty much stopped at that point. And you can see that Erikson's theory went on beyond Freud, and that was part of the reasons why they split up and they weren't friends anymore. So another theory that we get introduced to, of course, is Piaget's theory of cognitive development here. And the first, in infancy, we have the coordination of sensory and motor development. And then we get this term operations, which are the internalizations of internal representations of things in the world. So we have a period of pre-operations, which is there's no internalizations of the external world, or that's developing. And then we go into concrete operations, which is, yes, I can internalize things, but they're only things that are concrete in the real world. I can experience them. And then in early adolescence, we see the capacity for abstract thinking and abstract reasoning and problem solving, the pinnacle cognitive abilities of human beings emerging with what Piaget called formal operational thinking. So that's another theory. You can see it along the timeline when these things are going on. And then we can look at the social clock. What's going on? What are the expectations in our society here? We have a period of preschool, then pre-K, kind of depending on how that works. Then you have kindergarten, then you have grade school, junior high, high school, college, and or work, and then work, and kind of your life going on from there. And finally, I drew in here kind of a growth chart. This is drawn by hand, so don't rely on it. But we basically have very, very high growth rate early in life. It levels off, and then there's a peak right at puberty, and then it levels off, and some of us even shrink a little bit, after that. And so these are the models we're going to look at. And one more, and that is the prenatal development. And in there, what I want to do is demonstrate how we take the developmental perspective when we're trying to answer questions about what's going on in a particular person's life. What psychological, physiological, sociological things are currently going on. Now, the value of studying developmental psych is when we're in a helping profession, whatever it is, nursing, social work, psychologist, or even just working with your own kids and whatnot, and something comes along. You're moving away to a new city. Person gets injured. Person sustains a disability. Or the person loses a parent, or loses their best friend, or their goldfish dies. I mean, you're looking at events in people's life that may, to some degree, interfere with their normative development. All these theories are what quote unquote normally happens. But then if events come along and they say something's changed, and we say, oh, how is that going to affect my daughter? How is that going to affect my son? How's that going to affect me? And we look at that question, how's divorce going to affect the kids? And we can draw lines down these particular charts here that I've developed, and we can say, well, these are the areas that are currently, a lot is going on in terms of development, so these are the areas we might want to pay attention to. So let's take a look at some of these. So first we're going to start off by looking at prenatal development, and I'm going to draw a vertical line right there. So here we're looking at a period of time, partway through week 6, almost into week 7. And as we go down that line, we can look at the prenatal development that's going on, usually during this period of time. Now, the kind of reddish pink areas means that there's really important development that's going on there. So any interference in that particular phase might result in major abnormalities. If the development that we're looking at is in the orange colored, then there may be impacts, but they're going to be functional and maybe minor in their nature. And of course, the white areas, the development's not happening there. So let's say this mother was exposed to she was given a drink that contained alcohol, or she was smoking, or she was abused, or she's lost her job and that went into poverty. Any sort of thing that can come along that could potentially interfere with the normal development of this child. We see that neurological development is going on almost through the whole gestation period. That's happening, but that could result in some major abnormalities. The heart is mostly developed, so maybe some minor. Same with the upper limbs, but the lower limbs might be impacted. The ear and the eye and the palate and the teeth, but the external genitalia have not started yet, so they're going to be fine. So that's the predictive picture that we have at this time. So if we looked at another area of this chart, let's say we examine someone here. Here, something happens, those same sort of events, but it's incredibly early in the pregnancy. If there was going to be a teratogenic effect, which is the word we use to describe something interfering with in utero development, it may result in the loss of the pregnancy. It would be so it'd be so profound, and the potential damage or development is so early that it may result in a loss of the pregnancy. Now, finally, on this chart, we can look at, let's say we looked at somebody on the 20th week of gestation. Now, we see the heart, upper limbs, lower limbs, and the ear and the palate are all set. Those things are not any major or minor stuff going on there. However, there is a chance for neurological issues, eye issues, teeth, and external genitalia, and eye, teeth, and external genitalia. So you can see that in this, when we say, let's say someone this is actually an assignment in my class, I have them, someone comes up to you and says, I think somebody spiked my drink, I'm pregnant, I'm not intending on drinking, but somebody spiked my drink, I think I got a drug of some kind, it happened on week 7. What might happen? Well, obviously you'd refer them to their gynecologist, but if you wanted to show them this chart, you could say, well, these are the things that are normally going on there. These are the things you might want to talk to your doctor about and see. Now, again, these are all probabilities. These are not certainties, kind of thing, but obviously there's so much going on. The truth is we really don't want to have any teratogens in utero because that period of development is so sensitive, as are the early years of child development. So we're going to take a look now at the larger scale theories that I'm having and do that same practice. We'll put a line right down there and talk about the things that might be going on. So let's try right here. So here we have a little bit over age 3, something happens. Let's say the child becomes paralyzed from the waist down. There's an auto accident and the spinal cord injury, and that child is now disabled. And what we look at, we'll say, well, how is this going to affect that child in Erikson's theory? So we're moving from autonomy. Maybe she's past the stage of the autonomy stage is really when it's like the terrible twos, and it's when the child wants to do things on their own and they're learning to do things on their own, and it's closely associated with initiative. But initiative is they come up with ideas on their own and they want to implement them. One is tying their shoes, the other one is, I think I'm going to make my parents breakfast while they're in bed. We can, those kinds of things. So then we add a mobility issue. The child cannot no longer move about. So the expressions of their potential initiative might be things that the parents focus on. How can we encourage our daughter, now that she has to roll around, how can we encourage her to take those cognitive initiatives in order to make up for some potential loss in that functioning? Now, I'm not going to really discuss Freud as much because that theory is not as really there. But let's move into Piaget's, and we're looking 3 and 4, and let's combine this with pre-K. The child's in pre-K, and they're really starting to expand cognitively, moving into that concrete operational stage. Now, it's important early in these stages that there's developmental things that are going on. There's experiences in the world that allow for this cognitive development to happen. Expectations, let's say. They're in preschool, and we've moved beyond the pre-operational stage, and now we're into, let's say, the type of play a child would have. So the child in pre-operational play would have a very maybe solitary play, maybe cooperative play to a degree, or companionate play when you just have 2 people in the sandbox just doing their own thing. Now, when we go into concrete operational thinking, you what you might observe in a child's play as they transition from pre to concrete operational thinking is that block of wood is no longer a block of wood. It represents something. That block of wood is a vehicle, it's a building, it's a animal going through the sand. So it has that internalized symbolic representation, so the quality of play starts to change. It starts to have that imaginative quality to it. Now the child's in a wheelchair or the mobility issue, so how do the parents make sure that they still have those opportunities to interact with other children and in that natural milieu develop those skills? Now, of course, we have pre-K. We can also see that's the psychosocial thing that's going on. What's happening there is they're learning social skills. They're learning those differences in, the age 3 is actually a really important age developmentally. We have the beginning of gender identity development, or that's really starting to get there. We start having friends. We start seeing differences between others and ourselves, and we develop actually at this age theory of mind, which is the perception, the ability to understand that other individuals have thoughts independent from us, and their actions will be dependent on those thoughts, not on the reality that we know. So at age 3, we start to see kids lying. That's actually a time to celebrate because they have now transitioned into theory of mind, so they understand other people will act on their beliefs, not on the reality that only you might know. So children might say, well, I didn't do that, my imaginary friend did, or Billy did that, or they might do those kinds of things because if I can convince mom to push her punishment onto somebody else, she'll act on those beliefs. Very important stage of life here, and it happens in these natural milieus. So if there's mobility issues, then it's going to be important for these parents to provide in-house and out-of-house opportunities to develop initiative. It's going to be important for them to, again, get that play behavior to happen so they can have those concrete operational experiences and develop those. And of course, the pre-K environment with other kids and developing those cognitive skills, again, through that play and interaction that's happening at that age. Finally, we see on the growth chart, it's sort of a stable time. Again, this is not the most accurate of growth charts here. There might be little bumps along the way, but it's not a critical period per se, but there is important physiological development on the way. If the individual, very young, the bone growth that's going on in the child is stunted because they're not submitting their legs to the natural environment of gravity. When we walk around, one of the reasons why we have bone and muscle growth is because of the resistance to gravity. So small children who end up paralyzed or they can't use their legs are often given routines of exercising in order to encourage the bone and muscular growth that they would have normally had so their bodies continue to grow in the normal ways. So a tough time for mom and dad too, having to kind of accommodate for all these changes because of when this has happened. Now let's do this again. Here we go. And we have our 13-year-old who has his family up and moved away. And I'm going to talk about this from a personal standpoint. So when I was in junior high, my mom got married to my stepdad, and we moved to Guam. So what happened to Mark? People have probably been asking that a lot. So we look at what's going on at junior high, just going into junior high. I was actually, we moved at Christmas time. So what's going on with my identity? This is the beginning of my sense of self, exploring different aspects of myself. And that will come back when we talk about what happens during junior high and specifically what happened to me in that area. So formal operational thinking started to happen. This was advantageous because even though that was just developing, I had the ability to kind of be abstract thinking. I was able to explore my emotions. We can actually talk about the future with our children. So my mom talked to me about what does this mean, and I was in formal operational thinking, and I was actually ready to hear some of that. Now, going on to the high school thing here, we have junior high. Like in my hometown, the entry into 7th grade was when all the schools combined into one school. There's 4 communities that all went to junior high. And of course, this is throw a whole bunch of kids in there, and all the cliques and all the, that all starts to go. And they had divided us into the 3 areas of school. So there was college prep, and there was business, and then industrial arts. And they put us into those categories. And here I am in college prep. And I was there for just a short while. Then we moved to Guam. And then I came back in 9th grade. So I missed the entire period of junior high, in which all the new friend alliances were created. So when I arrived, the gangs were not the same gangs anymore. And think about what that meant in terms of identity. Individuals were able to develop a sense of themselves by connecting with like others, and particularly in this new, wonderful, broader selection of individuals when all these schools came together. I was fortunate that my experience was only 2 years long. I came back, and I was popular because of where I'd been. So the re-assimilation of me into junior high and the cliques was relatively easy. My personality was outgoing, and so I didn't have too much of a hard time with it. But I remember getting back into my hometown. We had moved back in the summer, was anticipating going into 9th grade, and everything was different. It wasn't like coming back home again. I remember being very aware of the fact that people were different. They were older. They had developed without me being around. I, of course, had developed as well. And so it did have a pretty large impact on my identity. And probably in terms of long-term impact, I was and continue to be a little less likely to develop deep friendships. So as I moved through high school and into college and whatnot, when I went to college, for example, I didn't develop lifelong friendships like some people did. And I think it may be because of that, what happened in junior high, that not only was I taken away during a period of time that was critical, but in the military itself, when people are getting transferred all over the place, there's actually a really interesting phenomenon of intense, this is among dependents that I know, that intense relationships with the people. You become really fast friends, you're just with each other all the time, and then when your friend leaves a year later, it's a goodbye, and it's an ending of that relationship. So there's this intensity, and then interestingly enough, several times while I was living in Guam, I had friends that got transferred away, and your friends would show up, and they would see you off. They would see you go onto the plane and wave, and and all the hugs and all that stuff, and it was a ritual that people went through. Maybe some of you who are watching this have been children in the military, and you know what I'm talking about. And there's a ritual of letting go of those friendships, and that sort of has characterized my friendships throughout my life. It's intense, relatively short term, and it's only in later life that I've been able to establish friendships that go much further than that. Okay, one more. Look at late life. Let's say an individual's riding their snowmobile, and they get into let's look at a divorce. But the divorce is happening to that person. Okay, so here's a 50-year-old that gets divorced, and what's going on is they're in the generative stage from Erickson, then post-formal operational, but they're pretty experienced at post-formal, so they can take care of that. And work, they're right in the middle of work. So how might a 50-year-old going through a divorce get impacted? If you had a friend who's 50 years old, what's going on. The big questions in their life are going to be, they're going to be somewhat fundamental. Generativity is all about creating your lasting legacy. So a 50-year-old going through a divorce, and then, hardly ever someone plans to do that. So they've had their rails set to have this family and retirement and all these things that they had planned, and suddenly that's gone. And that could be a real threat to someone's perception of how well they did on Earth while they were here. This period of time when we're supposed to be, creating the legacy, creating our lives, creating what we are going to contribute to this world. That might also involve children. So the individual and their relationship with their children gets disrupted because of this, and then that too changes the way they see their legacy unfolding. They have the formal operational thinking to think abstractly and problem solve and work things out. So that's an advantage, and certainly when people are going into the depression of this or whatever, or maybe a midlife crisis and they're going through the other way, you can reason. There's some reasoning ability for this individual. And the place where you might see that manifest is, of course, going to be in work. We see here that right at the bottom, that work is may be impacted. Their productivity may go down, or as a result of their divorce, they may pour themselves into work as opposed to dealing with the ramifications of these changes. So, when you're buying a house, it's all about location, location, location. When you're talking about psychology, it's all about when. When did this happen? What was going on? Look at the theories, and believe me, these are just the lifespan theories. There's tons of little theories, of just adolescence and just identity and all this stuff. All kinds of things that we discover when we look and we explore the field of developmental psych. And so I encourage you to enlighten yourself with the Developmental Psych textbook and read it all and see all these things. And I hope this has been it's a unusually long Dr. K's Psychobabble, but this is an incredibly important part of my my own reading, research, and practice as a psychologist. So please subscribe so you can get the notices when these come out, and I will see you next time.